We're going to get started on the covers of the album. The covers are made of 3 pieces. I used a box that I trimmed to the sizes that I need. Just a regular cardboard, chipboard, cardboard, everything. That stuff works. Okay. The album cover is basically made of 3 pieces. You've got the front cover, the back, and the spine. The front cover measures 9 inches high, and it's 9 inches across. And the reason for that, it's a little bit wider because I've got these tags that stick out of the side of my pages, and I want to make sure I'm going to have enough room to add my little closure here. So let's get started on the cover. I've cut my pieces to the proper size. I guess you're not going to be able to see the whole left side of it, but this should work. So I've got my 2 covers and my spine. I marked the top just so I don't make a mistake and put them this side instead, because I want that 9 1/4 inch to go across. So what I do is, in order to give some strength to your book, because you'll be opening and closing it, we add a piece of plastic or anything sturdy to cover the back of your spine, and that will help by taking some of the strength when you're folding your pages, your cover open and closed. So it's not just the paper that's going to be holding the whole thing together. You've got this sturdy sheet of plastic on there too. So to adhere this sheet of plastic, I'm going to start by putting 2-sided tape to the edges of my spine, because I'm going to stick my spine down first on the plastic. The covers go through quite a bit of tape, but you don't want to skimp, because that's where you don't want your album to fall apart. Now, for the plastic, I had this sheet protector stuff, and it works great. It's nice and sturdy. So this is what I use. I just cut my piece out. It's 9 by 7, and it's really sturdy, so it's perfect for this. Now I take my spine and tape side down. I'm going to tape it to my plastic, getting it straight as possible. Then I use my bone folder on the back, and I just press down where my tape was. Get a nice sticking on the surface. Okay. Now, I'm going to attach my covers on the left and the right of the spine to the plastic. And I'm going to leave about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch in between the pieces. That way the top part can lift up. Okay, and it's just going to rub against the edge of the spine. Otherwise, if it was too close together, your album wouldn't open and close very well. My tape actually is pretty close to that 1/8 inch, so I can just use this and put it right next to the spine. And I can use that as a guide when I lay my cover down. So I'm going to put that on each side. Okay, now I continue adding some tape to the piece of plastic, and I'm going to put this strip right next to my 1/8 inch gap there, because I'm going to put my cardstock right on this first piece, and then the other ones can be a bit more staggered. Side. I'll start with my top front piece. I want to get this really straight, because if my cover is crooked, when I go to close it, it's going to be crooked. So you really want to get this straight. I'm going to use my cutting mat because it has lines on it, and it's going to help me line this up. There, so it's going to be lined up like that. Now I'm not going to remove the first piece of tape because this is just to show my gap. But what I'm going to do is, instead of removing all of the tape, I'm going to remove just the first strip next to my gap. And I'm going to stick my cover down. The reason I'm just removing one strip is in case I need to adjust it. It's a lot easier just to remove one piece of tape, actually lined up like that, than trying to unstick the whole thing. There. And then I can test closing it like that. I see it's even. So this is perfect. Now, once the first piece is stuck, I can just lift that up and go ahead and remove the backing from the rest of the tape. And lay it down. That's just my husband washing the windows. He does windows. Okay, so there's my first piece. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Here's the other piece. Actually, this is my back piece. This is my front piece. I'm going to line that up like that. Too high. Perfect. Done. Now we're ready to cover the outside of our album. So this is the outside, the plastic pieces on the outside. I'm going to be putting one sheet of paper from the middle to the right and then the other piece from the middle to the left. If the paper doesn't join completely at the middle, which I don't think it does, that's okay, because I'm going to have another strip of paper that I'm putting down the spine, so it's going to cover. There won't be any gaps there. So what I start by doing is I'm going to put some tape along across my pages. This is going to help hold my paper in place while I'm wrapping the album. You don't need a whole lot of tape, but enough to keep it from moving around. Also, I like having tape on the cover because when you put your paper down and you get a little bit of air in between with your embellishments, you don't want it to be sort of puffy. I don't know if you know what I mean by that. Okay. I do the same with the spine. Now, when I do the spine, I also put a piece of tape right around the four edges. Here, here, and on the other side here. Sorry, not the four edges, the two edges of the spine. And the edges of the covers, the inside edge of the cover. And the reason for that is when you close the album, you're going to want your paper to be nice and snug here, and the tape's going to hold it in place so it doesn't bubble up. I also want to mention you need to put a piece of tape between the spine and the cover. Okay, so our tape is ready. Now I take my two sheets of paper, and actually they do meet in the middle. I was thinking of another album. But what I want to do is make sure that I have about an inch at each end, top and bottom, so that I can wrap the paper around the ends. So what I want to do is I want to join this paper together. So I'm going to put some tape just on the edge of one side. And that's just to hold it together. I'm going to just tape these two pieces together. Like that. Okay. So this seam here isn't going to show because I'm going to have another piece of paper that I'm going to put right in the middle of my spine for contrast. Okay. So I lay my paper down and I can start removing the tape from my covers. So the most important strips of tape are here, close to the spine. Because that's where it's going to see the most action. And you want it to stay put. Go through a lot of tape, but I get mine at the dollar store. It's acid free. And it's only $1.25 for 66 feet, so it's not bad. I usually go through about 2.5 rolls of tape when I'm making one of these albums. That's why I don't use the big tape guns, because it's more expensive, I think, and I don't want to use my funds for tape as much as possible. Okay, so now I'm ready to lay down my covers. Paper's facing down. I flip this over and I set it so that I've got about the same distance at the top and bottom, and it's centered horizontally. It's not too bad. It could be a bit more to the right, but it's not bad. Okay. I'll take my bone folder and just press on there and the spine. Now, before I wrap my cover, I'm going to cut the corner pieces so that they wrap better. And I do that by putting a diagonal line about 1/8 of an inch away from the end of your corner. And I do that on each side. That's going to help me fold the corners and they'll meet better. And I trim. Make sure you don't trim any closer than 1/8 of an inch. If anything, trim a bit further away. You don't want your cardstock to show through your corners. I didn't do this one very well. More at an angle like this. There. This one either. want as straight an angle as possible on there. Now I'm going to apply tape along the edges of the paper and the cardstock. I don't need to apply any tape in the corners here because these are going to be folded up anyways. When we attached our spine to that piece of plastic, we had this piece of tape that was measuring out the 1/8 inch gap. But now this piece of tape also comes in handy because when we lift up our paper to wrap, we're going to lift up the little end of the tape, lift up the end of the tape backing so that this is sticky. And when I fold up my paper, I'm going to push in there so that it sticks inside where the gap is. So I'm going to lift those up right now. If you didn't put the tape as a marker, you just add it now if you wanted to. Okay? So now, it's easier when you start with a narrower end piece. And what you do is you just sort of press down and get it started that way. This must be making a real mess on the camera. Okay, so that it's folded up like that. It's easier when you fold the whole thing over at first. So now I'm going to remove my tape from the end and from the cardstock, and I'm going to start wrapping my album. Nice and taut. And press. And turn over. So I'm going to fold this over like that. There we go. Okay. When I do my corner, if you press against the very corner with your fingernail, just to sort of get that paper in there like that. I don't know if you can see that. I'll try holding it up closer. If you press in here, okay, you'll get a better fold. So let's try that. And you do that at each corner. hard working with super huge pieces like this. Okay, so there we go. See, you get a nice corner. I don't know if you can see that. And I do the other end. Remove the tape. And I do the same thing here. Push this in. There we go. And then the last side, I push this corner in. And I do the same thing to the other end. Hold down. Got to remove this part. You really want those crisp corners. So we've got the outside of the album covered. Now I'm going to prepare the piece that's going to go on the spine of my album. I took a contrasting piece of paper. I'm using pink, and this is going to wrap around the top and the bottom piece of my spine. Before I do that, I want to punch a decorative edge. You don't have to do this, but I like doing that. A little decorative edge on either side. I just got this new punch, so I may as well try it out. This is a Martha Stewart doily edge punch. It's kind of neat. I like things that have a vintage look to them, so this is great. Edge. Yeah, I like that. Now I put some tape on each side. Down the middle. So center it on your spine. Here and that back there. Now if you wanted to add ribbon, now is the time to do it if you wanted a strip of ribbon to go, because then you can bring your ribbon in on the inside. This is all going to be covered. So you want to hide the ends of your ribbon, so you would wrap them over the edges of your spine here. And actually that's what I'm going to do. I have this piece of lace that I'm going to put across. Actually I shouldn't have even bothered punching my little edges on my paper, because my lace is going to cover it anyways. But I want the lace on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach my lace and tape it to the inside. It's a bit too long. I think I'll put a bit of tape right in the middle. And I'm going to put some across here. Like that. I wonder if I should do that instead. No, I'll just cover it. I was hoping my pink would show up more. I could have cut my pink paper a little bit wider, then it would have shown through a bit more. tape doesn't really want to come apart. Well, what I'm going to do in that case, I'm just going to lay it down. Put a piece of tape there. Yeah, now it's coming on. Okay. Basically, you just want to hold it in place because when you lay down your binding, it's going to be taped down. Okay, so your album cover is ready. The outside, that is. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our binding. And I'm going to show you, there's two methods. The first method is one created by Laura Dennison, and there's a link to her YouTube video that shows how to do this. The guys who bought my tutorial earlier, I'm using the Laura Dennison, I'm referring to Laura's video for doing the binding. I've since come out with a new method, and if you want, I can email you. It's about 4 pages long. It's very similar, but it's a different way of doing it. And I find it's a little bit more flexible for the distance that you're leaving between your pages. I'm going to go ahead and show you my version, since there is a link to Laura's video that explains how to do her version called Stack the Deck. And I'm also going to put the Stack the Deck YouTube link on this video website for those of you who have the newer version of my tutorial that includes my version of the binding in there. So basically what it is the binding is made of 5 hinges, and these hinges are attached to your album, and the pages attached to the hinges from the pocket. The pocket slides over the hinge, like so, and it's taped to the hinge on both sides, and this is what forms your binding, and your pages lay nice and flat. Okay, you've got a half-inch gusset in between your pages. That's way there's lots of room for your embellishments and all of your photos. Okay, so we're going to do the binding next, and like I said, you can either use the Stack the Deck method. I'm going to demonstrate how I do my new method of the binding, and it's not complicated at all. Okay, let's start doing the hinge. I'm going to show you the method that I came up with. So basically you've got 4 pieces cut 7 7/8 inches tall by 2 inches wide. You've got 1 piece that's cut 7 7/8 inches high by 1.5 piece wide, and then you've got 1 piece that's 8.5 inches high by 3 inches wide. This is the base spine. This is what your hinges will fit on, like that. Okay. So I start by scoring my pieces. I start with my 2-inch pieces. Okay, and I score it 1/2. 1 inch and 1.5 inches. And I do that to all 4 of my 2-inch wide pieces. So 1.5, 1, half an inch. Actually, I already did that one. And these other ones I had scored ahead of time. Okay. My 1.5 inch piece I score at 1 inch and at 1/2 inch. Okay, now let's go back to our 2-inch pieces. The way this works is I'm going to fold the first 1/2 inch score mark like this, and then I'm going to fold again on the 1 inch score mark. So basically I'm left with this, which forms my hinge. This last score mark, I don't fold that because I'm going to be using that as a guide. So I'm going to go ahead and fold along those first 2 score lines, the 1/2 inch and the 1 inch, on my 4 2-inch wide pieces. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue my pieces. This first fold here, I'm going to apply glue, or I can just apply tape. I think I'll just apply tape. And I'm going to glue it closed like this, so it's going to stand up. Basically, my hinge is going to be a double layer of cardstock. In my instructions I say to use tacky glue, but tape works well for this part here. You don't have to wait for it to dry. Okay. Now, my smaller 1.5 inch wide piece, I fold at the 1/2 inch mark. And the 1 inch mark. Okay. And I add glue to my hinge. There, so my 5 hinges are ready to assemble. Okay. Now I'm going to use my tacky glue because I really want these to hold on solid. With tape, it could pull. I mean, this is going to get a lot of action going, so I'd rather use tacky glue because it's really, really solid. Now, this first score line to the right of your piece, the score line that we didn't fold, that's going to be a guide, because you're going to take this piece and the left side of your hinge where it stands up is going to be lined up with that score line. So you're going to have a 1/2 inch gusset in here. So this would be your first page, your second page, your third page, and so on, and we're going to work down like that. Okay, so I like using tacky glue. You could use tape if you want to, but I just always prefer using glue for this part. There you go. Make sure you don't put your glue beyond the score line because it's going to show in your gusset. Actually, I should have done this a different way. And I should have put glue on my second piece instead, rather than trying to keep this area clean. But I'm going to go ahead and do this. Now, because the gusset is 1/2 inch and your hinge is 1/2 inch, an easy way to do this is you can just line it up with your first fold, like this. Line up this piece with your first fold, just flatten it out, like that, and lift it up. There, so you've got your 1/2 inch gusset, and your piece is attached, like that. Okay. Now I'm going to add my third hinge, and what I'm going to do is, instead of putting the glue on here, I'm going to put it underneath here along the edge. Okay. Okay, so that's my third hinge. It's nice and straight. It's important to get these straight, because if these are crooked, your pages are going to be crooked in your album. Hinge number 4 is actually the narrower, the 1.5 inch hinge. And the reason this one is narrow is you don't need that extra strip to glue on. This is going to fit right on and line up with the edge, because your last strip will be facing the other way. Okay, so this one you can just line it up flush with the edge. There, so this is hinge number 4, which is the narrower piece. There. Now the last hinge will fit in the reverse direction underneath your other sets of hinges, like that. So I'm going to add glue along this edge here. It's a really easy way of doing it because you don't have to measure too much. You can adjust the width of your gusset on the fly. I was using the score lines as a marker, but I mean I could put them a little bit closer together if I decided at the last minute that I didn't want a whole ½ inch in the gusset. So this one just slides flush against the edge of my previous hinge. There we go. So your hinges are shaped. Now we take these hinges and we're going to attach them to the base piece. But before I do that, I want to trim my corners diagonally because it'll make it easier to slide the pages on them. Just snip those corners off. Next, I'm going to attach my hinges to my base piece, centering horizontally and vertically. Again, I'm going to use my tacky glue. Now, since, let's see, will this fit? Yeah. I'll just center that. There we go. Next, I want to add the tape that I'll be using to attach the pages. tape on both sides of each hinge. Don't put the tape down too low, because when you put slide your page over, you don't want the tape to show up. So you want to make sure you don't get the tape all the way down at the bottom edge there, because it might show up a little bit at the bottom. It won't show up much, but so I'll leave a very narrow, see here, a very narrow little space. I do that to both sides. So there's my first hinge. Again, if you're using a wider tape, you don't need to put 2 strips down like I'm doing. And the other side. So go ahead and do the rest of the hinges with the 2-sided tape. Okay? I've already got a hinge that's ready, so I'm going to continue working with that so you don't have to watch me do this part. There. So this is my completed hinge set. This is going to attach to the spine of my album. And I'm going to want to make sure that it's attached very straight, because if this is crooked, like I said before, your pages are going to be crooked. And this will also cover the ends of my lace. And by the way, I really wanted that pink to show through, so what I did is I went back, I removed the lace, and I just added a wider band of pink that I punched on top of my other one because it was too narrow and I really wanted these edges to show. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use maybe a combination of glue and tape. Actually, no, I think I'm just going to use glue on this. I'm going to put glue tape around the edges. I think maybe a combination of both will be good. want this to be really solid. Okay, so my diagonal cuts are at the bottom, and I'm going to line it up with each side of, actually I put this tape here to hold my ribbon in place. I'm going to remove it. There. Okay, so I line this over my spine. Your spine measures 3 inches, and this base piece measures 3 inches, so it should just fit right over. And press hard in the gusset to get a really good seal, and you're going to let this dry for a bit. You don't want to start adding your pages until you know it's very well sealed. So I'm going to stop the video for now, and then once this is dry, we can do the front part, just adding our pages. I was doing my tutorial, my video on how to attach the pages, and my camera shut down all of a sudden. So I've already got page 1 attached, but I'm going to show you how I go about doing these. Now, before you start attaching your pages, if you're going to want to add a chunky charm to the side here, now's a good time to add your eyelet from the outside. I'm not going to put one on there because I'm going to have large flowers on the side, and the chunky charm's not going to fit right. But I will be putting eyelets on the ends of my album because I'm going to have a chain closure, so I'll show you how to do that later. So when you're doing your pages, just ignore page 1. It shouldn't be there. Pretend I'm doing page 1 now. Make sure that you remove all your tags from your pages, and don't forget the tag that's hidden inside page 1. And the reason for that is you don't want to get these tags stuck as you're gluing your pages to the hinges. I've done that so many times, and it's really frustrating to have to rip everything apart to get the tags out. So make sure you remove your large tags first. And also what I like to do is I remove my smaller tags as I work. Once my page is attached, then I put my smaller tags back in so I don't forget where they go. So also what I'm doing is, because I've made so many of these albums and they're all the same, I'm switching the pages around. So instead of doing the main pages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've decided I'm going to do 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. So I've got my first page attached here, which is actually my page, I'm doing pages 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3. You can do them whatever order you want. So I've got my first page attached. You always start from the front working back. It's a lot easier because your pages aren't in the way as much when you're working. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply a page. I'm going to remove these tags from here. Okay, and this from the back. Now the way you do that is you start by removing a very small piece of the tape backing, and just fold that forward like that. And it makes it a lot easier to slide in your page than if you have the whole piece of tape off, because once this page hits the tape backing, it's hard to, the tape is hard to remove after. So I slide it. I start at the top and I just slide it over the hinge. You want to make sure that it's straight and flush against the base of your spine, so that when your page folds, okay, it'll be even here. If your page is crooked like this, when you fold your page, it's going to be crooked. So make sure that you keep that nice and straight and it's aligned between the top and the bottom. Once that's done, just push your page back, hold it in position, and just start removing the tape. Grab those little ends and adhere your page down. Once you've done this a few times, it gets really easy, and I find this binding method is so fun. Okay, so the front of my page is attached. Now I'm going to do the back of the page the same way. Flip this over. Now, I haven't pulled my tape out yet. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to fish it out. It's easy to remove with a sharp object. And I just pull and adhere. And that's it. The page is attached. Like that. And I find it looks really nice. You get that nice straight edge. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my other pages. Put these tags back in here. I mean, you can leave all your tags out while you're doing the whole album. I like putting them in because then I forget where they go. Smaller tags, I guess, if they're really snug in there, they can stay in. Okay, my second hinge, I line it up so that it matches up with the previous page. Very straight. Make sure this part here stays put. You don't want your page shifting. See, that looks really nice. I like that. I love this binding method. Take your time when you're doing this part because you don't want to ruin your album. Put all that work into it. I should have removed my tags. If my camera doesn't shut down this time. by having the top edge of your spine of your hinge straight and this one diagonal, it makes it easier to get your pages in. And also with the top edge, you can put your page in and move it as snug as possible, and you'll know your pages will be even with the other ones because all your hinges are even at the top. Also, make sure your pages are in the right position. Don't put them upside down. It's a good idea to set all your pages in the order you want and in the right position before you start tying these down. And voila, your pages are attached. And the next thing we're going to do is add the cover on the inside front and the inside back of your covers, the inside. And I put a pocket here, but again, you can put other elements if you want onto these pages. You can put another waterfall there, you can put a pocket there, or use any of the elements in this album and you give it a customized look. And I'm going to go ahead and put the pockets the way they are in the tutorial.